And we are live. So I'm not counting this as an episode that I typically cover, episodes that we cover throughout the week. This is a side project that I'm doing. And I decided at the last second that this was the direction I wanted to go in with it because I have a channel. And channels cover relevant content, and we do cover sci fi fantasy on An American Werewolf in London. So this will be a special episode of An American Werewolf in London, and I am the American Werewolf. This channel is going to be covering the Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power series that was released to the public last night on Amazon. I started to watch, I'd say, the first 15 minutes last night, but I was feeling a little under the weather with allergies. So I turned in kind of early and decided to wake up this morning and finish them out. And what I wanted to do was make sure that I was not suffering from confirmation bias. So I wanted to watch these with fresh eyes and to say, if I was wrong, then I'm wrong. And hey, great. Now we've got I would love to be wrong as often as possible in terms of these sorts of things because, hey, we've got, a new hot series to cover. I'm enjoying House of the Dragon right now. I was really pissed off about the way Game of Thrones ended with season 8, but excuse me. I think I am suffering from fall allergies, if there is such a thing. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm pissed off about season 8, as I was saying, but I'm really enjoying House of the Dragon, 2 episodes in like this. And it's been really good. I'm fascinated. Well, I'm not fascinated, but I'm interested in the characters and I'm enjoying what Matt Smith is doing. The CGI looks great and the story is good. So no problems there. Here, though, here's the thing. I don't want to be overly brutal on this thing, although it probably deserves it for a lot of different reasons that I could get into. But the kindest description I could give this, and I used it in the thumbnail, is that it's bland. It's really, really bland. It has pacing issues that you just wouldn't believe. You just want these episodes to be over because nothing ever really happens. I just sat there for 2 hours, probably in 15 minutes, and nothing really happened in the story. A bit here and there, and we'll get into that, but really bad pacing issues. The main character, of course, is Galadriel, who is, in this interpretation of Tolkien's work, I mean, here's the thing. This really isn't even Professor Tolkien's work. When I watch Lord of the Rings, if I were to read Lord of the Rings, if I were to watch or read The Hobbit, I have all of them on Blu-ray, the extended editions. There's a warm feeling that occurs. It makes you happy. There's none of that here. There's no feeling at all that I get from this other than boredom. The main character, Galadriel, she's insufferable. And to recognize her and contrast her with Cate Blanchett from the Lord of the Rings trilogy and some appearances in The Hobbit, there is no contest. This is a really unlikable character, this Galadriel. The other characters are either boring or incompetent, or both. And with one exception, which I'll get into in a little bit. So the story sort of starts out with Galadriel as a child, and there's about a 10-minute introduction to, the setting of the story, where we see Galadriel as a young child, and she's making a paper boat. This review will have spoilers in it, but when I give away some major spoilers, I'm just interjecting this. I will give a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then if you want to cover your ears or whatever, that works out fine. But Galadriel, as a child, is playing and making a paper boat, and she sets the boat out into the water. And elves are magical. Okay, so the boat sort of opens up into this beautiful sort of sailing thing, and it's really nice to watch. And then the other children come across it and say, that's not going to float. And she's like, well, it's not going to float, it's going to sail. So the boys' solution to that is to proceed to throw rocks at her paper boat until they manage to sink it, which is something kids do to each other. Kids are, pretty damn mean when they want to be, because, their brains aren't developed. They're just, doing shit. Her brother Finrod interjects because Galadriel flips out on the kid who sunk her boat, and she's going to beat the crap out of him. Kind of pulls her aside and gives her a talking to. I'm not exactly sure why the scene with the boat had to happen, because it doesn't seem to affect anything that happens for the next 2 hours, except to say that you see her brother Finrod, who's much older, talk to her. You could tell he's a positive influence in her life. And then, this sort of happy scene, where they're living in Valinor occurs, and it flips right from that to the war. We thought we were going to be happy. We thought that this would last forever, but it's not. And suddenly the war with Morgoth, it just flips into that. I was disappointed. You don't see Morgoth. It would have been nice just to get a glimpse of what they thought their interpretation of Morgoth could have been or was. I'm not sure if that's a rights issue, because Amazon only has the rights to these appendices. I think Warner Brothers has the rights to The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, so maybe they have the right to Morgoth. No, because they would have mentioned them, but they don't include Morgoth in here at all. There's a split-second battle scene that I liked with one of the eagles. I won't give all that away. If you want to watch it, watch it. I know a lot of people are saying, don't hate watch it, but watch it and see for yourself. Maybe you'll like it. I don't know. I just found it was bland, and I didn't care. It reminded me of when I watched The Rise of Skywalker. I got about 10 minutes into the movie and I realized I just didn't care about any of this. It was complete disinterest. And so, that's what I got to with this. Flashes of the war. I suppose, if some benefit did come out of this, it's that it's made me want to reread the Silmarillion. So that's a good thing. You don't see Morgoth. The war, they give this narration through Galadriel that the war goes on for centuries, and her brother ends up dying in the war. And then, suddenly Galadriel's a young adult, and she takes her brother's knife or blade or whatever, and this is her mission now, to hunt down Morgoth and his evil, and Sauron, his evil followers, so on and so forth. It's a cold feeling. I mean, from Tolkien, even when you watch the introduction to the Fellowship and you see, the battle with Sauron and Isildur, and, Cate Blanchett narrates the tale of how Isildur is tempted by Sauron even after he, sort of chops the ring from his hand. You're invested in that. You're not really invested in this at all. The tradition is kind of gone because it's gone off in some weird direction that doesn't feel authentic. Maybe it's because, I've read the books, and so I recognize, what is and is not authentic. I'm in no way, shape, or form a Tolkien expert, but I understand the stories and the premises, and I've read the Silmarillion and, Children of Huron and, these sorts of things. The Galadriel character, it's not Galadriel. It's not Tolkien's Galadriel. This feels like a bit of bad fan fiction that someone just threw $1 billion at. Galadriel is feminine. She's ethereal. She's angelic, even, that she's just, these things to such an extent that she's awe-inspiring. That is the Galadriel that we've known for 20 years. This Galadriel is a female military commander who's tougher than all the male elves. So it just sort of feels empty. She wants to keep going. They want to turn around because she's been following Sauron. Even though Morgoth is defeated, she won't give up on this idea that Sauron is still out there. And she leads, these troops out there for centuries. It's just going further and further north where you get to the scene where, she's hanging onto the cliff wall. That all this is in the first 10 minutes. All the things that you've seen in the trailers and everything like that basically happened in the first 10 or 15 minutes. They have some things that kind of aren't explained. They get inside this one fortress, abandoned fortress, and suddenly, hey, a door used to be here, and she just punches, the ice to reveal the entranceway, and you're like, how the fuck did you figure that out? There's no setup for these things. And if you're going to take Professor Tolkien's work, then you have to take it with the greatest of care and concern. But there's none of that here. The male elves are basically telling her, look, we exceeded our orders months ago. We have to turn around. But because this is, this insufferable type of Galadriel, she just, sort of dismisses everybody out of hand. Over the course of 2 hours, you just watch her dismiss everybody. There's a scene with a cave troll or a snow troll. None of the other elves can fight. She's the only elf that can fight. And she just easily sort of dispatches this troll while the male elves are just kind of screaming and yelling and getting tossed around. It's nothing you recognize as Tolkien. It's just, it's fan fiction. It really kind of is. It doesn't even make you angry. It's just not interesting. You're not invested in it. Eventually, it leads to an insurrection, and they're like, "You're on your own, lady. Like, we're not doing this anymore." And they all lay down their swords and kind of walk away, which we'll get into a little bit later on. Then we're introduced to the Harfoots. Now, my understanding is there's a rights issue where Amazon isn't allowed to use the term Hobbit. But they're hobbits. They're hobbits. But they're not the hobbits that we recognize from, the trilogies. These are kind of like these dirty hippies. And they live like in this commune where they're like hiding in plain sight from humans. You're not interested. There's no warm feeling when you have Ian Holm narrating what it is to be a hobbit, that they love solitude and they love food and they love beer or ale and, they love smoking pipe weed and simple things. There's none of that. They're just there, and hiding from humans. And they play this light, clever music and you're just like, eh. And you've got this one of the other main characters, Nori Brandyfoot. I guess she's supposed to be like, as Gary from Nerdrotic said, female Frodo. She's going to be the female Frodo in this, and she wants to explore, which is kind of different from the setup. Like when we met in The Hobbit, Bilbo had no interest in going on any sorts of adventures. Neither did Frodo until the situation, sort of forced their hand. Here, this girl, she just is, wondrously adventurous. And that sort of passes too. And again, you're not interested. You get to meet Elrond, who's not an elf lord at this time. He's a herald. He meets Galadriel because once the men sort of turn on Galadriel, she's forced to come back with them. I'm surprised that actually happened. This Galadriel, I thought she would have just kind of trekked on, but she decides to go back. She's incredibly rude to him. He's her friend. He's being polite. She calls him a politician. All these. She has no personality whatsoever. It's a broken record with her. We have to hunt down Sauron. We have to hunt down Sauron. We have to hunt down Sauron. She discusses nothing else. She's granted leave by the king, Gil-galad, because he's tired of her shit. He's like, I think, actually, one of the characters I did sort of like was Elrond. I liked the Elrond character because he spoke sense. She refuses to accept the leave to the Undying Lands until it's kind of forced upon her. But he tells her to her face, and these were some of the best lines. I picked out some of the lines that I really enjoyed. He goes, "Do you truly believe seeking out Sauron will satisfy you? That one more orc upon the point of your blade will bring you peace? If you are wrong, will you lead more elves to die on far-off lands? To convince yourself you have done enough, how many more statues, because all the dead elves have their likenesses carved into these elven trees in remembrance. They're like gravestones or monuments. To convince yourself you have done enough, how many more statues would you add to this path?" So Galadriel is just this proud, hubris-filled, self-absorbed sort of, I'm trying to get away from certain terms. She kind of is a Mary Sue. She's a Mary Sue. She is. And I can't remember who was the YouTuber who usually defends these sorts of things, saw it and caught it on an early preview. It's a female reviewer. I can't remember her name. Oh, Jesus, I can't remember. But she said that she was actually a Karen and a Mary Sue. She was a Karen and a Mary Sue. So this is not an enjoyable character. She's not a pleasant character. She's not pleasant to her friends. She just, you're not going to tell her anything. You get to meet Arondir and Mador. They're guarding some of these outposts. Arondir is a black elf, but I really don't care about that. He's having an affair with Bronwyn, a human woman, and they're warding over these lands where the men were once loyal to Sauron. You meet Bronwyn. They were okay. They were, somewhat interesting. At this point, I mean, I've gone about it. The first episode is about an hour and 5 minutes, and I guess I've gone about 40 minutes into it. It's really slow. It's really slow. You get to meet, again, we come back to Elrond and Gil-galad. The same wind that seeks to blow out a fire may also cause it spread. He says that about Galadriel because he's sick of her stirring shit up all the time. So he sends her basically like a forced pleasant retirement. You're going to the Undying Lands in Valinor. You can see in every scene where everything is going because Galadriel's not going to listen. The Harfoots are going to hop and skip and jump, and, nothing's really going to happen there. It's all very predictable. It doesn't seem like there are going to be any surprises. This is 8 episodes, I believe. I'm 2 episodes in, so I'm already a quarter of the way in. And if this wasn't supposed to be some loose adaptation of Professor Tolkien's appendices, I probably wouldn't even be watching this. If it wasn't, and I saw it, I might think a little better of it, if I'm perfectly honest. But it's Tolkien's work, so yeah, they're not even close to meeting the standard. The one scene that I really did enjoy was where they open up. They're sailing the ship to the Undying Lands, and the door, the portal to Valinor sort of opens up. It's very beautiful, but of course, Galadriel's not going to go. She's got to speak her own truth, and she just jumps ship in the middle of the ocean. She just jumps ship and starts swimming, and then the portal closes and she's alone. So she doesn't have to deal with any of the people who are just like, what the fuck are you doing? She doesn't have to deal with Gil-galad. She just kind of goes off on her own. And then the episode sort of ends with the wizard in the sky, sort of that we've seen in the trailers, sort of hitting like a meteor or a comet or something like that, and then lands, just outside the Harfoot territory. And, I'm going to give away a spoiler here. From what my understanding is. So cover your ears because I'm going to give it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Essentially, this is supposed to be Gandalf. My understanding is that this character, this wizard who, sort of lands like a comet next to the Hobbit, encampment, is Gandalf, a young Gandalf. And that's kind of where the episode ends. So What did I like about it? I liked the effects of Valinor, and I liked Elrond. I liked Elrond. He's not the Lord Elrond that we know, and from Hugo Weaving. That to me is Lord Elrond. But he's the only person who even remotely seems to speak some sort of sense here, and so I appreciate that. That was a long hour. That was a very long hour to get through. So we go on, and the name of the first episode is called A Shadow of the Past. And then we go into the second episode called Adrift. And it opens up where Galadriel's just swimming in the middle of the ocean. She has no idea where she's going, but she just keeps on swimming. There's some small interaction with Nori and the wizard where she's trying to take him out of the meteor crater, which isn't hot for some reason. And at this point, watching both episodes back to back, I consciously realized that I was bored. I'm like, this is boring. I don't care about any of these characters, which again, brings me back to the Rise of Skywalker. I didn't care. You go to back to Elrond, and he's taken off with Celebrimbor, who shows you Fëanor's hammer. And it was kind of cool. It would have been much better to see Fëanor in that story than what we've got here with Celebrimbor. But you meet Celebrimbor, and doesn't look like an elf at all. He looks like some sort of 80s soap opera star. In this long sort of flowing green smock. The elves don't look like elves. When we saw Legolas Greenleaf, that looked like an elf. When we saw Elrond, when we saw Galadriel, when we saw Celeborn, when we saw Thurendil in The Hobbit, they look like elves. These just look like human. They look like Vulcans, like humans with pointy ears. They're not particularly wise all the time. You get one or two that are, and then one or two that aren't. They don't come off like elves to me at all. So, like I said, right around the beginning of the second episode, watching them back to back, I started to actively realize that I was getting bored. Celebrimbor has this idea that he wants to build some sort of monument because Fëanor's hammer caused great joy with the Silmarils, but then also caused great pain through the wars. And you get the idea that Celebrimbor is sort of bursting with ambition, which is not very elf-like. He strikes me as sort of incompetent, and not interesting at all. So, they go off to Khazad-dûm to try to recruit the dwarves. And suddenly, you meet Prince Durin and Princess Disa, which I'll get into in a minute. And it descends into a rock-breaking contest, as to whether Elrond can stay, because he's pissed off Durin by not visiting him for 20 years. And so Durin's feelings are hurt because in the 20 years, Durin has gotten married and he's had children, and his friend Elrond has missed all this. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Why are we talking about a hurt dwarf's feelings? Now you're back. Galadriel's still swimming. It's not interesting at all. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like from one frame to the next, the editing on this is not good. It's not good editing. She's swimming, she stops, and then in the next frame, a raft with like 8 people is right next to her, and you're like, where the fuck did that come from? And there's survivors. Their ship's been attacked. There's like a sea dragon or something like that, and there you meet Hallbrand, the character Hallbrand, who's part of the survivors of this vessel that's been, sort of capsized, and, everybody's sort of living on this huge piece of planking, or some planking that they've thrown together. And again, another major spoiler coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's my understanding that the Hallbrand character is Sauron. So Sauron in this series, my understanding is you won't see Sauron at all, I think, in the first season. But he is there in the personification of this character, Hallbrand. And Hallbrand actually, I mean, as mediocrity went, he was one of the better characters that I spent 2 hours sort of watching. He sort of the ship gets sunk by the dragon or the sea monster or whatever, and that predictably leaves Hallbrand and Galadriel together. So, I mean, no matter what it is that you've done, Galadriel has done one better, and she's got to tell you about it. You have not seen what I have seen, with Elrond. And then, she tries to kind of do this with Hallbrand, and maybe this is why I liked Hallbrand. It seemed to be the one character she couldn't get away with it. He just kind of sees right into her because, supposedly he's Sauron. And he says, look, elf, you didn't cause it, because she wants to know where he's from. And he says, well, my home's been sunk by orcs. It doesn't exist anymore. And, she's like, well, maybe I can get you, back in there and, bring your community back to life. And he's like, look, and these are some of the best lines. Look, elf, you didn't cause my pain and you can't fix it, no matter your will or your pride. If you want to murder orcs and settle a score, that's your affair, but don't dress it up as heroism. Which those lines perfectly sum up what Galadriel really is. And yeah, just an annoying fucking elf, just an annoying character. And it wouldn't be so bad because we've gotten used to these sorts of characters watching the MCU, as I think now there's 23 lead female characters and 8 male. So it's totally flipped in like one phase or, a phase and a half. And all these types of, series, that we've seen in Star Trek and Star Wars and Doctor Who and, all these different things. So we're used to that kind of thing. Not necessarily with Tolkien, though. And I think Tolkien fans are just kind of holding the line on this one. They just want nothing to do with it. So, yeah, it's just, people don't want to have anything to do with this. And they're just like, fuck off. Hold on a second. We got a comment here. We got Nikki Cunningham. Hey, Nikki, thanks for stopping into the stream. Guy Ladbro acted like a menstruating bear. Yeah, that's a fantastic analogy. She's just chewing on people like all the time. You try to be nice to her. You try to reason with her. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. I'm right. I'm right. And it's just, like who the fuck wants to be around somebody like that? You go back to the Arondir and Bronwyn thing. You get the first look at the orcs because in Bronwyn's territory, which is now being abandoned, as Gil-galad calls all the elves back, he sort of declares peace and that the war is over. We find that the orcs have actually been tunneling in there. You get your first look at the orcs. I wasn't terribly impressed. I wasn't expecting anything spectacular necessarily, but they weren't as good as what we saw in The Lord of the Rings. I was a little put off by the orcs in The Hobbit. It seemed like more CGI than practical effects and makeup that we got with Lord of the Rings. Those goblins, in Khazad-dûm, those, at the battle of at the end in the Return of the King, where they're Minas Tirith, the Uruk-hai from the Battle of Helm's Deep. Those were terrifying creatures. And then you got to these CGI sorts of things in The Hobbit. And now this, not so much. I wasn't terribly impressed, one way or the other. Bronwyn, who's having a love affair with Arondir, the elf, manages to kill one of the orcs, which I don't necessarily have a problem with because she went into mama bear mode. So, yeah, that's fine. No big deal. Yeah, I mean, we're flipping back and forth, and none of these stories are necessary. There's a bit of dialogue, like I said, that grabs my attention, but nothing else. I want it to be over. The stranger, as they call him, which is probably Gandalf, sort of whispers to these fireflies that the Harfoots that Nori is using to light her lamp. to create like a constellation in the sky to show them that this is where he wants to go. She has to take him there, the place where these stars line up, which she doesn't know where that is. You've got a little dwarf paranoia. Doran's father, the king, he doesn't trust the elves. You find out that Theo, who's Bronwyn's tweenie, adolescent, maybe 12, 13-year-old son, somehow he's found what I believe is Sauron's sword. He's found some sort of Morgul blade, and it's reconstructing itself. There's a recurring theme of this symbol, which I think we recognize as the symbol of Mordor, but they don't recognize that yet. And then, Galadriel and Halbrand get rescued at sea by someone who we don't recognize. You only see them in silhouette. And those are the 2 episodes. I mean, sometimes when I watch something and I'm not interested, I can talk about it later and then pick up on things, or something will occur to me that I might have missed. But there's not much here. There's not much here. The editing is bad. The pacing is very, very bad. The characters are not interesting at all, or unlikable. The only 2 characters that I managed to like were Elrond, again, who's not up to the standard that we recognize from Hugo Weaving, and the Halbrand character, who I liked a little bit. I mean, I don't know enough about him yet, but just that he was able to put a plug in Galadriel for a couple of seconds. I mean, that's worthy of praise right there. But that's my review. It's bland. I don't care. I don't dislike it. Well, I won't like it. I don't like it, but I don't dislike it. I'm just indifferent towards the whole thing. I'll continue to cover it because it's relevant content, and this is what I want to talk about on the show. But I mean, if you want to check it out, see it for yourself, I mean, it's out there. I'm going to be checking some streams later on. Twitter seems to be pretty busy, bagging it for the most part. I think it got a blistering review in the Daily Mail, and then in Entertainment Weekly. They said it's kind of a catastrophe. So, I mean, you're going to get the usual shills that, go out there for a week or 2 weeks and just clap and clap and clap, and then blame people who don't like it. It's their fault. And then they'll move on to the next project, whatever that is. And then, they'll be there for the first 2 weeks of that, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I can't believe that they spent $1 billion on this. And I'll make a great comparison, which I did in the very beginning. I'm watching House of the Dragon right now, and I actually wish I might actually start covering that and do some catch-ups, because that's a really good series. I've enjoyed those first 2 episodes. It's not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but it's good. It holds your attention. 2 episodes, again, we're 2 episodes in. Every time Matt Smith is on there, he steals every scene. The CGI and the effects are really good. The characters, for the most part, are interesting. I mean, you recognize a lot of the repetitive themes from Game of Thrones, but it's not bad. It's 1,000 times better than this. And I was rooting for HBO. I was rooting for House of the Dragon over this. And so far, I haven't seen anything that let me down. Now, my understanding is that it's going to be 2 years before we get the second season of this. So who knows? I mean, and there's also my understanding that Amazon has basically put all their chips for their streaming service on this in terms of original content. So if enough people raise enough of a fuss and make a logical argument, a concerted argument, I just don't want to throw, the gorilla shit, at people, at the cage, maybe they'll make some substantive changes. One can only hope, because otherwise there's nothing good to say about this, except that you hope that the criticism will cause people to pause and reflect and do better, because Tolkien's work deserves better. It deserves more respect than this. This is not good. And I find it hard to believe that. I say this all the time when I talk about certain movies. How do these studios, how do they look at these things and say, yeah, this is ready for release? How can you not recognize? I mean, I don't work in Hollywood. I'm working out of the back of my room, some room in my house. But if I can see it, how can they not? I don't get it. I don't get it, especially with this much money on the line. This much money. What is it? $58 million. $58 million to put me to sleep in one episode, and then another $58 million. So that's $116 million to basically make me feel like I just want this to end. What a waste. What a waste. Okay, that's my review. I hope you liked what you heard. If you didn't, thanks for sticking around as long as you did. If you catch it in the replay, like this video, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back next week with, the next review. Hopefully it'll get better, but I'm not betting my grandmother on it. All right, take care, everybody. Have a great day.